Here is week 1 of a brand new series, True Virtue. It's all about character, so strap up for a great message.
Well, hey there to our Elevate family all around the world. Great to have you with us today as we're launching a brand new series called Who You Are When No One's Looking. And we unashamedly lifted this title of this series from a book by Bill Hybels of that same title, Who You Are When No One's Looking. It's actually a book that I bought and read, 15 to 20 years ago. And the lessons that the book focuses on, which is all about character, are at least as important, if not, I think, more important today than they were when that book was released and when I first read it. So here's one important thing to know, that character is not the same as talent. See, talent will often get you in the door. Talent will often help you rise to a higher level, but talent alone won't keep you there. And you know this. You know this because you've seen business people, politicians, celebrities, sporting people. You've seen their talent take them to a high level, and yet they've done or said something or a series of things incredibly stupid that's actually undercut who they are, undercut their position, and has seen them effectively fall from the level they were at because they didn't and hadn't developed the character to keep them at the level that their talent took them to. And I'm not dunking on these high-profile people. It just, they're the ones that we see. But the reality is that a lack of character will cause everyday people's lives to implode at a certain level. I've seen marriages that have imploded because one or both of the people in that marriage lacked the character and said and or did dumb stuff because of the lack of character. I've seen businesses fail because the leader of that business didn't have the character required to lead the staff or make sound decisions. I've seen careers detonated, and so on, and so on, and so on. And so that's why, starting today and over the next 4 weeks, we're taking this deep dive into the importance of character. And we're going to look at 4 of, not the only, but certainly 4 key aspects of character that we need to develop if we're going to continue to move forward as people, continue to build our lives, and continue to build into the lives of the people in our sphere. So the first one I want to tee off with today is honor. And I'm aware that this topic of honor doesn't get much airplay. I mean, literally, full disclosure, this is the first time I've even preached about it. I mean, I've thought about it a lot. I hope to a large extent that I'm giving honor where God's called me to do it, and I'm leading in a way that's building the culture in and around Elevate, that we are people who are known for how we honor the they that God's called us to honor. But I've never preached about it, and look, maybe you've never heard a message about it. When was the last time it came up in a conversation where you talked about honor? And yet, despite it not getting much airplay, it is very, very high on God's radar in terms of the importance about it. He has a lot to say about honor. He has a lot to say about what honor is. He has a lot to say about who we should honor, and he has a lot to say about why it matters. And so what I want to do today is just take it's just a flyover. We'll barely get our toes wet. But hopefully this jumpstarts something in us that we put honor very high on our list of character qualities that we are committed to developing individually and together as Elevate Church. Now, here's an important qualification. It's vital that we understand that honor is not the same as respect. They're actually 2 separate concepts. Now, they sometimes overlap, but they're not the same thing. And so the way I say this is honor is given, respect is earned. And if we mistakenly conflate the two, then the mistake we'll end up making is we'll give honor based on a performance metric. You know, if the person deserves it, if they don't disappoint me, if they say what I want them to say, if they only meet my expectations, and then I'll give them honor. And if they don't do those things, if they disappoint me, if they say things I don't agree with, if they don't live up to my expectations, then I'm going to withhold honor. And yet, honor is not driven by a performance metric. Honor is given, respect is earned. So, let's define terms. Very simply, you've got access to a dictionary just like I've got access to a dictionary. But rather than give you a standard dictionary definition, let me give you a Bible College 101 definition of honor and, by comparison, of dishonor. So here it is. Honor means to value, respect, or highly esteem, to treat as precious, weighty, or valuable. And by contrast, dishonor is to treat as common or ordinary. See, the they that God calls us to honor, and I'm going to get into who the they is in a moment, but the they that God calls us to honor, he calls us to honor because he sees them as precious and weighty and valuable. And he says because he sees them as precious and weighty and valuable, he wants us to look at them, the they, in the very same way. And because as we develop the reality that the they that God's called us to honor are weighty and precious and valuable, that we'll choose to give them honor where honor is due. And we'll build them up and not tear them down. We'll honor them and not dishonor them. We'll be very active, not very passive. We'll be pursuing, honoring the they that God's called us to honor. So I've boiled things down to four, probably the top four. They that God calls us to honor. Let me start with this one. This is something that Solomon wrote. Honor God with everything you own. Give him the first and the best. Newsflash, no, I'm pretty confident that for most of us, this is not a newsflash, that God wants us to honor him. I mean, he's God after all. If there's anyone that was weighty and precious and valuable, I think he fits into that category. And as a consequence, he says, honor me. I want you to honor me. And Solomon's proverb there certainly leans into us honoring God with our finances and our money and our stuff. But it's not limited to our money and stuff. In fact, it's about giving God the first and the best of everything we have and everything we are. That we're to prioritize God with our time. We live in a FOMO culture that increasingly people don't commit to going to something because just in case something better comes up. Because, FOMO. So that's actually filtered into church life, sadly, that some people haven't chosen to prioritize giving the first and the best of their time to serving in a church because, if I do and something better comes up and God says, well, there's nothing better than serving in my house. You don't got to serve in my house. We get to serve in God's house. We get to honor him. We get to be servants to the King of Kings. Nothing is greater than that when it comes to our time. We honor God with our bodies. He calls our bodies holy and precious. And we honor them. There's things that we don't do to them. There's things we don't put in them. There's things that we don't look at. There's things we don't do. We're called not to do the dance with no pants with somebody who's not your spouse. That's about honoring God with our bodies. And then, of course, finances. And then worship. We're to worship God. And That doesn't just mean singing some Christian karaoke songs, although expressed well, that is an incredibly powerful form of worship. But it's everything. It's through the day, thanking God for who He is, thanking God that we're alive, thanking God that we're created in His image and likeness, thanking God for opportunities, thanking God for His presence and His power in our lives, and just being constantly in a relationship daily with Him and worshiping Him as we go. Now, if honoring God because He's God isn't enough for you, then there's some added incentive that God Himself said. You see, He actually promised that I honor those who honor me. And yeah, by the way, those who scorn me, I demean. But there's an added incentive that actually, when we choose to honor God, God says, that's great. I will, in return, honor you. So before I go on to the next one, let me specifically honor those of you who are putting God first in your finances. And look, in a culture that tries to tell us that everything that comes to us financially is for us, those of you that are actually choosing to put God first with your finances and investing into His kingdom by giving to and through Elevate Church, I want to honor you. Because it's an incredible step of faith. It's powerful, and it's allowing us to go further faster in our mission of reaching people and building people. Those of you who are serving in Elevate Church in various capacities, but specifically I'll give a shout out to those in our online experience team. You know, I'm the guy in front of the camera at the moment, but I can assure you that there is a growing army of Elevate team members who you may never meet. But they are working, editing, filming, hosting, preparing to ensure that we're reaching people beyond the geographical limit of just Perth metro area, but actually enabling us to reach people, everybody who has access to the internet. It's phenomenal. So we honor you. I honor you. All right. So God's the first they. Here's the second they. This is the Big Ten, or one of the Big Ten, aka the Ten Commandments, where God Himself commands us to honor your father and mother so that you'll live a long time in the land that God, your God, is giving you. Simply honor your parents. And I get it. Some of you are saying, well, clearly God hasn't met my parents. And I get it. I understand that this commandment is going to be easier for some of us than for others. It's going to be typically easier for us who have grown up with and continue maybe to have great parents. And this commandment's going to be far more challenging to those of us who grew up with a janky relationship with our parents. I get that. But again, let me revisit this principle that honor and respect are not the same things, that honor is not a performance metric. That yes, some of you have had or have parents who have done or have said or continue to do and continue to say things that have caused you over time to lose respect for them. I understand. I sympathize with you, and I know that's a reality for many people. God calls all of us, even those who have had those janky experiences, or to honor our parents. So I don't want to kind of just paper over this one. If you struggle in this area, if you are, saying my parents don't deserve honor, maybe just take a baby step. Maybe, and I'm not judging you if this has been the case, but let me just put it on the table in a healthy manner to say, if you've found yourself dishonoring your parents because of their low score on the performance metrics as parents, if you found yourself dishonoring them, the way you talk about them with other people, that your speech and how you talk about them is just tearing them down all the time. Maybe even how you speak to them is tearing them down to you, tearing them down all the time. Maybe just take a baby step and pull the handbrake on that one. Maybe just that the baby step isn't that you're quite yet ready to honor them, but maybe the baby step is that you'll dial back and ultimately stop dishonoring them. Because, look, let's face it, has any amount of dishonoring your parents improved anything? I mean, you may feel good in the moment. I felt good that I talked about, and you may need to talk with someone about some of that stuff, to a leader that you trust or a professional counselor, and that's an appropriate setting. But look, that's just my encouragement. I'm not trying to slice and dice who's better and who deserves more honor, but just to say that we do have some control over dishonor versus honor. And by the way, if you need any additional incentive, just like God said he'll honor those who honor him, this is the first of the 10 commandments that actually came with a promise. Up to now, God just said, look, do this, don't do this, do this, don't do this. This one, he said, do this, honor your father and your mother. And then he logged in a promise that you'll live, meaning if you do this, honor your parents, a long time in the land that God, your God, is giving you. All right, that's 2. God, our parents. Number 3, the they that God calls us to honor. Peter wrote this: make the master proud of you by being good citizens. Respect the authorities, and that word can be used interchangeably with honor. And I mentioned earlier, there is often some overlap there. Respect the authorities, whatever their level, they are God's emissaries for keeping order. So here we have God adding to the they list those in authority. Possibly when I say that, because this means police, fire department, this means civic leaders, community leaders. But look, I know that for some of you, your mind immediately went to political leaders. And you're thinking, the guy or the girl that's currently leading in my situation, they do not deserve my honor. I mean, I didn't vote for them. So this is a no deal. And again, honor is not the same as respect. Respect, yes, is often rated by a performance metric, but honor is something that is given. It's a choice, and we give it to the people that God himself considers precious and valuable. Now, I've been a professional Christian for 25 years, and I think that you'll struggle, and I've struggled to remember a time where I've dishonored a political leader. Now, by the way, in 25 years, there have been political leaders that have come onto the radar and been voted into office locally, statewide, nationally, here in Australia, that I didn't vote for, and or that I don't always agree and haven't always agreed with their personality or their statements or their policies. But here's the big lesson. You can disagree without being dishonoring. One of the prime examples, maybe the prime example, and one that I've baked into my brain, is David and Saul. Now, there was a time in history where Saul was the king of Israel, and David was on this meteoric rise in influence and popularity. So much so that Saul, the king, considered David a threat. You know, here's this upstart that's kind of coming for me and coming for my job as the king of Israel. And so, as a kind of preemptive measure, Saul put a bounty on David's head. Saul went after him. He intentionally set out to eliminate this threat by wanting to kill David. So there was this time in history where therefore David was on the run. He was running from Saul. He was hiding in caves and so on. And this one particular moment in history, David and he had a band of kind of renegade soldiers that had gathered loyally around him. they heard news of the king's convoy coming their way. And so they actually hid in this cave. And seemingly coincidentally, as King Saul and his convoy were passing by, King Saul needed to do a number 2. And so he couldn't very well do it just out in front of his convoy. So he excused himself and went into a nearby cave, which just happened to be the cave that David and his men were hiding out. So David and his men retreated to the back dark recesses of that cave. Saul entered the front and, began to do his business. And David, for a split second, saw an opportunity to eliminate the threat that was on his own life, that he could actually jump Saul, surprise him, and kill him. And for a split second, he entertained that notion. And then the very next moment, David realized that it wasn't his job. In fact, that God would not be pleased if he lifted a hand against the one that God had put in authority. And so he withdrew, and then he ordered his men who offered to kill Saul on his behalf to, no, we will not raise a hand against God's anointed, is what the writer records. And so for us, in a cancel culture that we live in a trolling culture, in a haters culture, in a keyboard warrior culture, in a coffee shop where we're running people down culture, let's be better than that. You can disagree without being dishonorable. One of the keys there is discuss ideas rather than running down people. It's a big, big, big difference. And instead of dishonoring leaders, we're actually instructed by God to pray for them. Not just pray for the people that you voted for. Not just pray that they will come around to agree with you. But here's what Paul wrote to Timothy, who was leading the church in Ephesus at the time. Pray especially for rulers and their governance to rule well, so we can be quietly about our business of living simply in humble contemplation. This is the way our Savior God wants us to live. So our prayers aren't about them changing their position. Our prayers aren't about them coming around to our correct viewpoint. Our prayers is that they would, even without knowing, open their hearts and their minds up to being led by God and having His wisdom invade their hearts and their minds. So, here's 3 of the 4. Number 1, God. And it is number 1. Parents, number 2. Those in authority, number 3. And I'll drop the 4th and final one here. Something, again, that Paul wrote to Timothy as a local church leader. Give a bonus. And this word bonus in other translations is translated double honor. Give double honor. Double honor. Hello. To leaders who do a good job, especially the ones who work hard at preaching and teaching. So he's instructing us to give double honor to spiritual leaders. And hey, obviously Paul's talking about me. And who wouldn't want to give me double honor? So I'm just going to end it there. This one needs no explanation. All right. No, that's not the angle I want to take. In fact, it would be self-serving if that's what I was underlining here and focusing on. In fact, I actually want to deflect how this applies in a local church context. I mean, yes, it includes me and it includes leaders of local churches all around the world that Paul says give them, us, double honor. Sure, great. This is not an easy job, people. But let me deflect. For example, locally, we have incredible team who lead Elevate Kids and invest in our kids from walking age to graduating elementary school, primary school. and invest in them consistently. And I say, well, they are worthy of double honor. And parents, those of you who are parents, who are part of our Perth location, give them double honor. Thank them. Give them a gift card every now and then. Don't just kind of, they're not there to do some Christian creche or some babysitting. Paul says they're worthy of double honor, and we need to be very active in doing that. We have a growing number of what we call Elevate groups. And Elevate groups, and by the way, this is starting to translate into the digital space with watch parties in various locations. But we've got people who lead them. These are small groups of people who gather regularly, and they build deep spirited relationships. They talk about the messages and what they're learning and how they're going to apply that. And there's people leading them. These are the shepherds. These are the shepherds in our church, and they're worthy of double honor. We have team leaders of various teams around Elevate, our music team, our media team, our hosts team, our operations team, our Elevate kids team. And Paul includes them in this, that they're worthy of double honor because they are on the front lines of the battle. They're on the front lines leading the teams, leading the army into battle, taking new ground, reaching people and building people. I get like this is the face or one of the key faces that we see, but that's not, no. These guys are phenomenal, do an incredible amount of heavy lifting, and so our team leaders are worthy of double honor. So in this, here's something that rips my undies, is that too many Christians and too many churches have developed a reputation for being known for tearing people down, sitting around gossiping and criticizing, which, by the way, it's just chatter. No, it's not. It's destructive and it's dishonoring. And so here's a benchmark that I apply, and here's a benchmark that I would encourage you to apply. And the benchmark is simply this: speak about people as if they were in the room.
I didn't get that.
Quiet, Siri. Siri's in the room. Speak about people as if they were in the room. In fact, so say it a different way. Speak about people in such an honoring way that the person that you're speaking with, not about, but with, finds themselves thinking, man, I wish the person you're speaking about in such an honoring way, I wish they were here to hear that. Instead of the person that you're with listening to the person you're speaking about, thinking to themselves, I'm glad the person that you're speaking about isn't here to hear this. As Jesus followers of sons and daughters of the King of Kings, we are better than that. We are better than dishonoring. We are better than tearing down. We are about building up. And my prayer is that as Elevate Church, locally and globally, that we continue to be and therefore build a reputation for being people who build up and never tear down. Here's a little final word from Coach Paul. He wrote to the church in Rome, like good coaches sometimes throw down a challenge, outdo one another in showing honor. This is what we call healthy competition. So family, great to be opening up this brand new series, Who You Are When No One's Looking. And next week, I'm going to continue this series. Week 2, I'm going to be teaching about integrity. So I'd love you to join us for that. I'd love you to invite someone to join you for, hey, maybe on the couch, maybe even a little watch party. And so, hey, fantastic privilege leading you, privilege investing into you, and we'll see you back here next week.